Chris Hayes woke up this morning to calls trending on Twitter for him to be fired because yesterday on his show, he talked about the allegations against Joe Biden that have been made by Tara Reade. Here is a section of his coverage to give you an idea of how just sort of straight reporting it actually was.
But part of the difficult lesson of the Me Too era is not that every accusation is true and everything should be believed on its face, but that you do have to fight yourself when you feel that impulse. You have to do that in order to take seriously what is being alleged and what the evidence is and to evaluate it. And that is the case with the accusation by a woman named Tara Reade against Joe Biden. A spokeswoman for Joe Biden says the allegation is false, and they have strongly denied it. This week, there was also a new development in the story, and that is that Tara Reade's former neighbor at the time went on the record with her name telling Business Insider that in 1995 or 1996, a few years after this, that Reade told her she had been assaulted by Biden.
Okay, so look, he goes on for longer. He talks with Rebecca Traister and all that, but the thing about it is that there are literally calls for him to be fired when he just updates people on the timeline of the accusations, some of the reporting that's been done around it. He gives the Biden campaign's response, but even that, simply for bringing it up, has been met with calls for him to lose his job at MSNBC.
Yeah, I mean, I wrote something about this for the Daily Beast and immediately turned off replies because it's sort of like a hornet's nest that whenever you talk about it, it's like sticking your hand in a hornet's nest, just even acknowledging it. I'm going to vote for Joe Biden in November, but I take seriously when women make accusations of sexual misconduct against men, even powerful men that I like. And it, as Chris Hayes said, even though it is hard to come to face with really uncomfortable truths or really uncomfortable accusations, we have to, if we're going to be morally consistent, we have to acknowledge when these things come up. I think that the calls for him to be fired are coming from a public that has had relentless bad news for 2 months. And I think emotions are running high right now. People are a little afraid. And so when any really extreme emotional reaction to a news story, I can just kind of chalk up partially to the fact that we're in a really bad situation, and we wouldn't be in this situation arguably if we had different leadership. And anything that endangers or appears to endanger that change in leadership really makes people nervous. I don't believe that anybody was on the fence about voting for Biden, and this one thing is going to make them go to vote for a man who's been accused of sexual misconduct, including rape, by, I think, 17 women. Nobody's going to jump to Trump because of this. This might be a disappointing story, a confusing story. And, I'm not saying that it's true or not true because reporting is still happening on it and we're still learning more about it. But I think the really extreme reaction to it is because our terrible leadership right now, the Trump administration, is what brought us here. And people really, really believe that the only hope for America's future is to get us out of here, and that Biden is that. So I think that's what's going on just in terms of the way that people are processing media. But I think calling for people to get fired because they talk about a story that you don't like is not a really good way to be taken seriously as a media critic.
Yeah, and I assume he's probably going to be okay. I don't think he should be fired. Just want to put that out there. I think he deserves credit for talking about this when most of the other hosts won't. Also, I would say that if you are one of the people on the left who is now giving him credit for this, he's done other good stuff too. I've occasionally given him praise for his coverage of the conflict in Yemen, his continued coverage on climate change, a number of different things. I don't watch his show regularly. I don't necessarily think that he's necessarily the best advocate for these things in terms of style, but he does seem to come from a good perspective. He's not the same as all of the hosts on CNN or anything like that. So I think that this is just the latest in a number of times that he deserves credit for being willing to say things that aren't necessarily sort of the running strategy at MSNBC on any given week. And so let's not fire Chris Hayes. How about that?
Yes. And I also think that this is a good point to say that, we're in an age where we're giving each other bad faith reads a lot of times. Like, we interpret things that people say as having the worst possible motivations. And that's just it's not a good way to live. I mean, if somebody is ostensibly on your side, I think it's good to give them the benefit of the doubt and assume that what they're trying to do isn't something destructive before you assume that it is something destructive.
Yeah.
Just as a general way of going about life, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. And look, I sort of agree with you. I think that the reaction against him is people thinking, if I take this seriously, in fact, if I'm even exposed to information about it, well, then clearly that means that we just have to have more Trump. And I think that you're demonstrating that that does not necessarily follow, that's not what it represents.
Mm-hmm.
What needs to happen is the allegations need to be heard. I would like to have a response from Joe Biden. I mean, we should point out that Biden has conducted dozens of national and local interviews in recent weeks, but has yet to even be asked about the allegations. His campaign denied the allegations in a statement on March 28th, and surrogates for the Biden campaign have been asked about it, but he has not. Do I know exactly what would need to be done for most Americans to be comfortable about this story and feel that justice has been served? I do not. But I know that the ground floor is him being asked about it. That seems like, and by the way, that doesn't mean that everything that's been said is necessarily true. We don't know. It's complicated, but he definitely has to be asked about it. I think that is sort of the minimum.
Right. I also want to say, I think a lot of media figures on the left have seen what happens when anybody brings this up in any way. And it's like sticking your hand in a hornet's nest.
Yeah.
You know, it's easier to just not just stay 10 feet away from it, even if it is an important story. The easier path is to just stay away from something that is going to, no matter what you say, make people furious. But the courageous thing to do and the right thing to do, if you are somebody who's in the business of truth, is to tell the truth and to try to get to the truth if you don't have the entire truth. So I think, like, trying to give a good faith read to the left-wing media, I don't think it's a conspiracy to protect Joe Biden. I think that it is a fear of any backlash for whatever it is that you say about this story, because people are really tired of the Trump administration, rightfully so, and they really want somebody else to be the president, and they really don't want anything to endanger that. So that's what it seems like is going on to me.
Yeah, potentially. Well, we'll see. I mean, he covered it. He's getting some praise. He's getting some attacks. We'll see if perhaps he'll interview her, or will other hosts start to, because he's sort of stuck his hand in that hornet's nest first. If he survives, perhaps they'll feel freed up to do it. I honestly don't know, but we will be watching, and we'll see.
Check out the Damage Report podcast each day, wherever you get your podcasts, whether Pocket Casts or Stitcher or iTunes. You can join me as I give you the news and stories you want, with a range of co-hosts and interview guests jumping in on the fun each day. Again, that's the Damage Report, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you get them at iTunes, don't forget to rate and review. Sometimes I'll read them live on the show.